And here's what's happening in terms of impeachment. We'll play the Biden in a bit. So we're anticipating an impeachment trial in the Senate. Nobody's quite clear on when this is going to happen because Pelosi has been holding back the articles of impeachment, has yet to send them to the Senate. We're in one of those areas where no one really knows what this means. Right? I mean, Noah Feldman, one of the constitutional lawyers or professors who testified in front of the House for impeachment proceedings, has written that if Pelosi doesn't send them to the Senate, he's not technically impeached yet. That is a requirement. That may be the case. I don't think that's, terribly relevant, frankly, because as far as the country is concerned, he's impeached. As far as he's concerned, he's impeached. Nobody anticipates that he's going to be convicted in the Senate. But the question is how much pain is going to be exacted politically and who's going to suffer that pain? It has been my contention for a while that pain is going to be felt by a half a dozen, maybe more, Republican senators up for re-election. That this puts them in a very tenuous position because they don't want to be seen as going against Donald Trump because the Republican Party loves Donald Trump. The Republican Party is Donald Trump. But they're also running in states where nearly half the population, maybe sometimes more, maybe sometimes a little less, don't want their senator to be so chummy with Donald Trump. And this vote, if you wanted to argue as a challenger running against one of these senators that senator is in league with Donald Trump, there couldn't be a greater gift than one vote that says, I support maintaining Donald Trump and don't think he's done anything wrong, or I think he did something wrong. Like that one vote sums up, because, we have, not everybody has time to sort of wade through all this stuff. That's one vote that can sum it up. Are you protecting Donald Trump? Or are you allowing him to be subject to justice? How do we know? How can we measure where this is from the perspective of these politicians? Well, we can look at some of the more vulnerable or politicians whose career is and power is wrapped up in being at least at arm's length from Donald Trump on the Republican side. And we can look on the Democratic side and see what are those Democrats doing in places where Donald Trump is rather popular. What do they feel they can get away with? Now, maybe these politicians don't know what's going on whatsoever, but we look at the polls. The polls have basically been static. Donald Trump's approval rating, I think, is on average, is more or less at the same, maybe slightly higher at this time of year. But it jumps around. It's jumped around throughout his entire period of his presidency. We can look at where impeachment stands. Maybe its popularity is down a point or two, but it jumps around. So here is, let's start with Lisa Murkowski. I don't think she's worried about a challenge, but her brand is trying to maintain some semblance of being above it all. She's probably the only one. Well, it's her and Susan Collins. Susan Collins really pretends. Murkowski, to a certain extent, remember, she won in a write-in vote. She lost her Republican primary last time around, if I'm not mistaken. And so let's take that temperature on where we stand in terms of impeachment in the Senate as far as the Republicans are concerned.
Demanding the trial process be fair, but there are questions about impartiality. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said there will be total coordination with the Senate and the White House counsel's office.
And in fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed.
Murkowski says while this isn't a criminal trial, the Senate is still required to do impartial justice under the Constitution.
To me, it means that we have to take that step back from being hand in glove with the defense. And so I heard what Leader McConnell had said. I happen to think that that has further confused the process.
The senator undecided how she'll vote until she's heard the evidence.
For me to prejudge and say there's nothing there, or on the other hand, he should be impeached yesterday, that's wrong. In my view, that's wrong.
As she calls for a process that is fair and full, and her vote could be key in ensuring that happens. She is seen as one of 3 swing Republicans, and she embraces her image of independence.
If it means that I am viewed as one who looks openly and critically at every issue in front of me rather than acting as a rubber stamp for my party or my president, I'm totally good with that. I am totally good with that.
Now, why is Lisa Murkowski so good with that? It's because she has a deep reservoir of integrity. No, it's because she's a politician and she has a sense of what's going to work in the context of her state. She is not so worried about being primaried. And as you get closer to the date when most of the filing deadlines end, that's early March, you're going to see a little bit more distance put in there relative to how much distance each of these politicians think they have to maintain. Susan Collins is also walking a tightrope. She came out and said, do we have audio of this? Here it is.
As well. Then we move to what I call the third stage. At that point, we debated whether or not we wanted to hear from witnesses and get additional documents. And there was a roll call vote with Republicans wanting witnesses at that point.
Pause it for 1 second.
And Democrats.
This is she's recounting the Clinton impeachment. Go ahead.
Few exceptions, not wanting witnesses. So we have a reverse of the current situation. And we decided to call just 3 witnesses and to have them deposed rather than testifying live.
Should Mr. Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, and John Bolton be people that should be called to testify, given their firsthand knowledge of this alleged quid pro quo, which the president hates, but that's what it was, on arms for an investigation deal?
I am open to witnesses. I think it's premature to decide who should be called until we see the evidence that is presented and get the answers to the questions that we senators can submit through the Chief Justice to both sides. What I don't understand is why the House, having issued subpoenas to Secretary Pompeo, for example, did not seek to enforce those subpoenas in court.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's not exactly accurate. We know that the House is pursuing subpoenas on 1 or 2 of these individuals that theoretically will set a precedent and force others to do so. But there's Susan Collins also hedging. And lastly, do we have a tear sheet from that? Doug Jones, who is the senator from Alabama, Democrat, who everybody presumes is going to lose because Democrats shouldn't be winning in Alabama based upon what we know of the makeup there. He went out on a limb too. Now, both of those Republicans, tiny limb. These are short stubs, but they're going out on a limb a little bit because they need to. Here's Doug Jones going out on a limb too because he knows that he needs to maintain his Democratic support. And he's calculating that there's room enough for him to do this even with the Republicans in Alabama. And all of this, the point of this is essentially to make the argument of where the politicians think they need to be on impeachment. And it gives you a sense of just where impeachment lands in terms of the import for each party's base. Doug Jones knows that he cannot win in Alabama without the support of every Democrat, enthused Democrat in Alabama. And he knows he has to come out and be supportive of a full-on process in the Senate, which is what the Republicans do not want. Lindsey Graham, despite what he said during the Clinton's impeachment, I want this to be over soon. Mitch McConnell, doesn't matter. We're hand in glove with the president. We're just going to wrap this up as soon as we can. These are guys who are terrified of their base in South Carolina and Kentucky. Lindsey Graham is looking at it both ways. He has a legit Democratic challenger in South Carolina now. And so he knows he needs every Republican to support him. So he's coming out strong against impeachment. Doug Jones knows he needs every Democrat to support him. So he's coming out and saying we need to have a longer process. Even Joe Manchin is saying that. So that's where we are in terms of impeachment. Of course, also, let's check in and see what Donald Trump says about impeachment. Here he is at a New Year's soiree. And
so glamorous.
At Mar-a-Lago, Florida. Here it is.
Doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, I'd be very happy with the trial because we did nothing wrong. We didn't even have a witness, and we won 196 to nothing. Okay, we didn't have a witness. That was all the Democrats' witness. Look, Adam Schiff is a corrupt politician. He's corrupt. He got up, he made a speech, said something I never said.
Now, I know what you're saying. What's the 196 to 0? We've done some sleuthing, and 196 to 0, there was 195 Republicans who voted to not impeach Donald Trump. Now, of course, Justin Amash was kicked out of the Republican Party because he wanted to impeach Donald Trump. So he doesn't count. And then there were 3 Democrats who voted against impeachment. 3 on one article, 2 on the other. But he's including Jeff Van Drew as a Republican because he had switched to being a Republican after the fact. So he's taking that as 196. That's what that is. And the not one witness, I don't know what he's talking about. There were multiple witnesses that could be called by the Republicans, except for all those Republicans refused to show up because at Donald Trump's behest. So, but there he is. I am very happy that his New Year's was spent worried about the impeachment. So there it is.
I hope they make 196 to 0 T-shirts on the campaign trail, the way they did the
read the transcript.
I mean, it'd be nice if some Democrats counted Republican votes like that.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh, yeah, we should
don't even count them.
Yeah, we just don't even. Sorry, folks. Republicans they had zero votes. We didn't count the Republican votes.
They are Republicans.
So let's turn to the other.